Kara Shalom, welcome to our watercolor journey. Today's focus is on using a store card and creating foliage. The materials used are listed in the description below. On the palette we have French Ultramarine, Dioxazine Violet and Gamboge Nova. Heinrich wanted to see how he can manipulate Dioxazine Violet in today's demonstration. We're also going to give you some special tips regarding the use of the store card. The Canson paper is taped to a flat board and he uses a Hwahong No. Hake brush to wet the top 2/3 of the paper for the sky. He's going to work wet on wet for most of the painting, so he needs the paper to be very wet. He starts with French Ultramarine and the Rosemary & Co. Pure Squirrel No. 10 round to paint the sky. He adds a touch of the premix and some of the pure Dioxazine Violet into the sky. He works very lightly and he uses the brush to gently blend the colors to create different values, usually dark at the top, and it gradually becomes lighter toward the horizon. Now he uses the colors on the palette to gently dab in the trees which will form the middle ground and background. The pigment is fairly strong to give darker colors here, but because the paper is so wet it spreads nicely, creating soft feathery edges. It's fascinating to watch how the paint spreads and blends. He uses more of the premix on the right because it will dry back a lot lighter, so it will create distance. The bold blue and purple on the left bring those trees more to the front. The brush is a bit drier, so he uses the belly to create texture through the dry brush effect. The brush only touches the raised areas on the paper, so it leaves a lot of white exposed, creating an interesting terrain. Heinrich adds some water here to blend the paint a bit more for the river, and he does not blend all of it because the white can resemble foam or sparkles on the water. He adds some Gamboge to the French Ultramarine to create the greens for the foreground. More Gamboge will result in a warmer green, which contrasts nicely with a cooler green. From here on, he will demonstrate 4 different techniques for using a store card. Technique number 1. He uses a store card to etch in some grasses. The corner is sharp, so it makes tiny furrows where the wet paint can pull to form the dark grass stalks. He then turns the card sideways and uses the broad side to push some of the wet paint around to create variation in the terrain. Technique number 2. He picks up some of the paint with a card and uses that to add the grasses on the riverbank. Time for some wet on wet splattering. If you don't have brush show, this technique works wonderfully. Where the paint is still very wet, the splatters fuse into the existing colors. In the foreground, the paint is a bit drier, so the splatters simply lie on top and create some texture. Technique number 3. He uses the store card again to etch in the trees in the background. The paint has dried a bit, so it's more damp than wet. So the card now pushes the paint away and it brings out the white of the paper a bit more. These trees are in the background, so there isn't much detail. Let the painting dry. He pre-mixed all 3 his main colors for the tree. He wanted to create a neutral brown. When you add a bit more Gamboge, it will create a more mustardy color, which he will demonstrate just now. He painted the trunk with a Rosemary and Co number 6 and then switched to the number 1 for the thinner branches and foliage. This part of the video is slowed down. Notice how he holds the brush to create the leaves. He uses the belly of the brush and very lightly dabs in the paint. It sometimes starts out wet, but the brush is small, so the paint runs out quickly to then give a nice dry brush effect that resembles smaller stray leaves. Notice all the variations in values in the tree and the leaves. Don't be afraid to use the colors you have. Heinrich's color mixing is always interesting because he seldom cleans the brush between tasks. This is a bit risky though, because it can easily muddy your colors. Just choose your colors well. Technique number 4. He creates more variation in the terrain here. He dabs in the paint and then etches directly into the wet paint with a store card. He adds a few strokes of Gamboge to bring back some light into the foreground. Then he adds a bit of shadow here and there to finish off the painting. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and let us know in the comments if you found these tips and techniques helpful. You are welcome to share your paintings with us on Instagram. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you soon. Vaya con Dios.